The plane, David Martin of the Pentagon, as we look at these pool pictures, which, Bob Simon, I'm underscoring now, these were taken at the air base around Riyadh, not the one around Dhahran, correct?
That's correct, John.
David Martin reported from the Pentagon earlier that, at least in the early going, that the naval-based aircraft had not been at the point of attack nearly as much. It was primarily American ground-based fighters and fighter bombers, together with the Tomahawk cruise-style missiles, many of which were fired from Navy craft, such as the USS Wisconsin and the USS Missouri. They bore the brunt, with the naval aircraft being primarily held in reserve. Does that match what you've been told or been able to gather there, Bob? I think, Bob.
Dan, the word is that the primary, our sense here is that the primary air strike so far has been from these bases, yes.
What you see are these ground crews. Let's look and listen for a moment as one of the planes took off north to Iraq. Riding the fire, sitting atop that jet, a young American, by manned aircraft of the sort you saw in the pool pictures from Riyadh, but also from American Tomahawk missiles. Those are cruise-style missiles fired from, among other places, U.S. naval warships. The Tomahawk is a long-range missile. In this case, it was launched from surface vessels, not submarines. It carries, each one of these Tomahawk missiles, a 1,000-pound warhead. It is among the most sophisticated and complicated pieces of weaponry in the world today. War protests are being seen and heard around this country tonight, and some overseas. This particular one staged around a bonfire outside the United Nations here in New York. Security has been tightened at U.S. airports as a precaution. Bomb squads are on alert at Los Angeles Airport as a precaution, and curbside boarding and baggage are now prohibited at the Hartsfield Atlanta Airport. All of those precautionary steps taken. And as Gary Reeves reported from North Carolina, and one doesn't say this lightly, in North Carolina, where at this time of year basketball is a kind of a secular religion, in North Carolina, the North Carolina State game tonight was called off as the war reports from the Persian Gulf came in. CBS News White House correspondent Leslie Stahl reported some time ago at the White House they were making an effort to carefully make it clear that while President Bush was calling some members of the alliance, he had not called them in advance about the attack. The White House said the president didn't feel that was necessary. The White House was maintaining a steady, calm alert, at least on the surface. CBS News coverage of war in the Gulf continues. Alan Pizzi in Baghdad reports from what he's been able to see that damage in downtown Baghdad, right in the center, has not been much. He pointed out that it may not have been the intent of the wave after wave of airstrikes to inflict heavy damage in the center of Baghdad, since it is a civilian concentration. At the White House, CBS News White House correspondent Leslie Stahl. Leslie?
Dan, it's pretty lonely here. The president went over to the White House residence hours ago. The White House staff has closed up operations. They say they've put a lid on. That's the White House term for everybody's going home, except the Situation Room. We're told the president will be getting continuous reports through the night from the Situation Room and from his National Security Advisor, Brent Scowcroft. We were warned by Marlin Fitzwater before he left here that what we are seeing tonight is only what he called the beginning. We have what he said were, quote, many long days ahead of this battle. So any reports that this could be over in the morning certainly were not expected to be the case when the White House office closed up about 2 hours ago. Dan, the White House said in his speech that he wanted to destroy Saddam Hussein's military arsenal, any nuclear potential, the chemical weapons, which will, of course, leave something of a vacuum in the Middle East. We have had no discussion here at all about what happens if this war is won quickly and easily. but there's some kind of Arab backlash, not just in Iraq, but throughout the entire Persian Gulf region. The president talked about creating stability in the Gulf, but there are experts who feel that a rapid U.S. Decisive, unqualified victory could create more instability, not just terrorism, but an upsurge in Islamic fundamentalism, an outpouring of Arab rage throughout the Middle East. There has been no discussion about what the United States might do from here forward to try to minimize any such backlash that many people have been expecting. As you know, the United States has been fighting this whole idea of a Middle East peace conference as linked in any way to Saddam Hussein's takeover of Kuwait. We might expect to hear something about a Middle East peace conference once these hostilities are over. But as I say, so far, certainly throughout today, there has been no word out of the White House or any other official places in Washington that would show any concern about what is inevitably the next step once this military...
Official pictures. Let's just pause to look and listen. This was during the period, very early on, several hours ago now, when air raid alert sirens were sounding inside Saudi Arabia, and as a precaution, with reports in the air, as it turned out, the reports, so far as we determined, were either untrue about the Scud missiles with possible chemical warheads being fired, or the Scud missiles never got there. This was among the sobering realities in the early stages of war in the Gulf. U.S. servicemen putting on their chemical weapons protective gear. A small mobile hut. I emphasize these pictures are subject to censorship and...
Tonight there were peace vigils, one on the state capitol steps, another in Boulder.
We shall overcome someday.
Tonight, as families gathered to watch the president, Lydia Mendoza's thoughts were with her only son, a paratrooper on duty in the Saudi desert.
If this has to be done, then let our boys go out there and do what they have to do and just get back home.
For others, it was a frightening night.
I hope they will settle something, maybe fast, maybe only one God knows what will be.
Connie, some late developments to report here tonight. Denver's mayor has activated the Emergency Preparedness Office and placed all city employees on alert to deal with any emergency, and particularly a possible terrorist attack. At the airport, luggage that's been left on carousels, cars left unattended at the airport curbs have been ordered to be removed. For the first time in maybe ever that we can recall, the concourses are now closed to all but ticketed passengers. Traffic tonight has been light to moderate. The assumption is that most people are following the events of the day on television. But for other
estimate of how much damage may have been caused by this initial air attack in the Persian Gulf War, it was difficult to see from our vantage point in the hotel. It appears that communications, at least, have been knocked out here in Baghdad. All telephone calls out of this Iraqi capital seem to have stopped. The power here in the hotel is no longer working. But other than that, we are not being allowed to leave the hotel grounds, so it's difficult to assess damage in other parts of the city. The air raid sirens did not come on when the attack began for perhaps half an hour or so, and they sounded about 3 hours later, just before the sun rose on Baghdad this morning. So the attack lasted for perhaps more than 3 hours. It seemed to cover an extensive area around the city, the presidential palace region, communications center, and a number of factories seem to have been hit by the bombing. We saw huge explosions in several locations where several people who know this territory very well said factories may have been hit. At several points during the night, you could hear what sounded like planes whizzing by. It was difficult to see them because of the darkness, but the tracer fire, the red stream of bullets would go up in the direction from which they were flying. ABC newsman Nathan Thomas also witnessed the attack during the night. Nathan, give us your impressions of what you saw.
Our vantage point was the 7th floor of the Al Rashid Hotel, and from there we could see across the city of Baghdad in most every direction. And for most of the time that the air battle was going on, there was nothing to see in the sky except tracer bullets and anti-aircraft fire. The sky, as far as you could see on the horizon and from right to left, was nothing but tracer bullets. Occasionally we saw explosions that looked like they could have been within the city of Baghdad. However, most of what we saw were bursts of light off beyond the horizon where all we could see was a flash and really had no idea of what was being hit at that time at all. During the night, as we stayed through the hotel staff at one point came through the hotel, trying to take everyone down into the bomb shelter that is built into this hotel. This hotel was built as a site for Arab Summit conferences, and so is built as a very secure building and has a very elaborate bomb shelter in the basement. Most people were taken down to that during the bombing and during the air raid. Some of us were able to stay up on the floors and see the entire event. What I'm going to do now is try and play some audio tape and see if you can hear it. Is somebody on there who can talk to me? Yeah, fine. Let me just put a tape on, and I'll play a little bit, and you tell me it's the sound of the gun firing, and then I do some actuality. Are you getting that all right? Across Baghdad, the sky is almost full of red tracers. There's a large flash over to the left. I can see smokestacks of some factory outlined. It's very...
Because so far, no U.S. casualties reported. Bob Schieffer is with retired General George Christ. Bob and General Christ, bring us up to date.
Dan, I think clearly one of the figure that brings home the enormity of this attack that has been launched on Iraq is that report that you quoted just a moment ago that came from the BBC in London, that 18,000 tons of explosives have been dropped around the Baghdad area. General Christ, if I remember my ROTC training correctly, that's about the size, the explosive equivalent of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. The atomic bomb, maybe it was 20,000 tons, but certainly it was something of that sort. Clearly, the night has belonged to the Americans. Now it is daylight. Bob Simon reported just a moment ago that fighters are taking off in the daylight. Will our planes attack during the day as they did during the night?
Of course they will. This air attack is going to continue, but we've got to start thinking now that as we stand here, the Air Force analysts are looking to bomb damage assessment. It sounds like we had a good night. Did we get all the damage we want? Did we get all the Iraqi airplanes? I don't know that we know that. Did Saddam withhold his aircraft? His planes don't fight at night. They're much more comfortable in the daylight, as all of his ground forces and air forces are. Is today when we'll see his reaction? I think all that lays ahead of us, Bob, and we don't know that yet.
Well, that clearly is one of the more critical things that we'll find out in the next few hours, and that is, number one, were his planes destroyed on the ground? Were the runways so cratered he was unable to get them off the ground? Or did he simply, as you say, decide it would be best to hold them in reserve and not try to launch them until today? His planes fight better in the day than they do in the night.
Yeah, certainly we own the night. Everybody knows that. Saddam also knows that. He may be cautious about trying to take us on in the night when we're going to do better and go in the air. Now he can use his anti-aircraft guns with their optical guided sights. Now he can use the surface-to-air missiles that can see in the sky that he couldn't do last night. A number of things that he can bring to bear during the daytime that he couldn't do at night. So I think we're going to have to wait and see a little bit here.
General, how much of this can he sustain? How long can his army take this, the kind of bombing that obviously they got last night? In other words, how much do they have to soften them up before the ground troops can go in?
Well, I think he can take quite a bit. All I can think of is the Chinese in Korea when we fought them. And we had the air, and we bombed, and we bombed, and we bombed, and they still fought. I don't think it's a given that because we have heavy air attacks and we soften them up, that they're going to just fold up. How long it's going to take, Bob, is really going to be what Norm Schwarzkopf looks out and says, when am I ready? How much damage has this done? And we won't know that for a while.
You're convinced in your own mind that that will happen, that ground forces will cross that border and go in?
Eventually, we're going to have to go in and take back Kuwait.
General, we can see now, and Dan Rather, I assume you're seeing these photos also, of planes taking off in Saudi Arabia. This, of course, is a fighter plane. Those are bombs being loaded. Tell us what we're seeing here, General.
Well, we're looking at F-15 uploading bombs that you can see the little nose on it. So these are smart bombs. That is to say, they're homing bombs that will be used against hard targets. You can see they're going to load them under the wing pylons. Those bombs are probably about 2,000 pounders. They'll be used again against runways, aircraft. And by the way, when they hit the telecommunications site, I think they mentioned, the reason they did that is that the Iraqi army uses telephone lines and not radio. So therefore, we'll have to go after telephone centers. These are the kinds of bombs that are going to penetrate and do those kind of things.
Now, when you talk about a smart bomb, what do you mean by that, John?
A smart bomb is a bomb that is either TV is guiding it, or it's homing in on by radar or something else. It knows where it's going to its target.
So that is the photo that we're seeing now, an Air Force maintenance man, an ordnance man, loading the bombs beneath the wing, and you'll have to tell me what kind of an aircraft that is, General.
F-15Es.
F-15Es. Well, that's it from here, Dan.
General, you said that you felt that a ground attack would be necessary. We've been saying all night long and that ground combat, this was the strategy, this was the plan, has not... is there a chance, is there still a chance that this tremendous aerial bombardment will make ground combat unnecessary?
Dan, I really don't think so. Again, it's too early quite to know how much damage we really got out of this thing, how many more days we're going to have to put into it. What did the attacks do against Kuwait that went in last night? All of this is an unknown, and I think eventually we're going to have to put foot soldiers on the ground in Kuwait.
After a 5-month wait, the thunder from the sky begins raining down on Iraq and Iraqi forces in Kuwait. CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite is with us. Walter, we have only a few seconds here before the break, it's my understanding, but interesting that President Bush echoed Dwight Eisenhower. You covered the Normandy invasion. No one can forget how you went in with the glider forces right behind the invasion. But General Eisenhower on D-Day said the liberation of Europe has begun. President Bush did not refer back to Vietnam. Instead, he referred back to World War II and said the liberation of Kuwait has begun.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I think that was rather noteworthy, as a matter of fact, that he took that theme to the... You know, Dan, one thing that occurs to me with General Chris' remarks over there a moment ago, and all of our thinking about the possibility that the the Iraqi Air Force has been waiting for daylight, that their daylight fighters, that their SAMs and others can target better in daytime, that they're not as sophisticated we are for night fighting. But they've had daylight now for almost a third of the day.
Good point.
And we still haven't heard that they're up against us, the Iraqi Air Force. So what is happening? I mean, surely are they waiting for afternoon or something to catch us at tea time?
Well, let us hope and pray that they don't get up at all.
Let's hope so.
As CBS News coverage of war in the Gulf continues.
So I don't think we've seen the end, and we've heard the end of the Iraqi response. Yes, it's very clear that the Iraqis lost the battle in the air, but I would think, and I'm not a military man, we have enough military expertise here, I would think that he always wrote off the Air Force, that we were going to hear from him through other more conventional means, that we would, and he always knew that we have to go after him in Kuwait on the ground. So I think I joined the cautionary note that yes, the early dispatches look good, but we have to wait and see exactly what the future holds out for us.
For the moment, Fuad, let us believe that Saddam loses the air war completely, totally, almost from the get-go. What could be next for him? What indeed is open for him?
Well, I think Saddam, you see, he believes in this phantom that he has created. He believes in the idea of Arab nationalism. He believes that he's really not engaged in a war between Iraq and the U.S., but really that this is an American Arab war, that he really is a representative of this large Arab nation. This is a phantom in some measure, but there is some truth to it. So I think that the Arab allies we have on our side, what they must now